The truth about Brandon Aiyuk and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do the Pittsburgh Steelers really want to sign Brandon Aiyuk? Does he really want to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'm Ron John. This is Steelers Therapy. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share. Let's get into it. Let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk. So first of all, the Steelers need at the wide receiver position. The Steelers absolutely need a wide receiver like Brandon Aiyuk. Anybody that's telling you that they don't is lying to you, or they're extremely misinformed. If you look at the Steelers' wide receiver depth right now, it's not very good. George Pickens is an ascending number one wide receiver, but he's in the lower half or the lower tier of number one wide receivers. It's pretty clear. He's had some good seasons, but when you start looking at the number one wide receivers out there, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, George Pickens still has a lot to prove. He's fine to take a number one position right now, but the Steelers have no number two. We got rid of Diontae Johnson. And while Diontae Johnson may have had butterfingers, he was still a great route runner. And he was very reliable to get open. Maybe not to catch the ball or catch the ball in the end zone, but at least to get open. Now you have a Steelers team that doesn't have a number two, that has a bunch of number threes and number fours. Anybody that tells you a rookie wide receiver and Roman Wilson is going to fill the void at number two has just completely lost their mind. The Steelers need Brandon Aiyuk. Because not only that, he's not just going to be a number two. You're basically going to have, instead of a number one and number two, you're going to have a 1A and a 1B. And it really depends. It's probably a toss-up to who's better. Their stats are similar, and we're going to get into that. But again, this isn't about do the Steelers want Brandon Aiyuk? Does he want to sign with the Steelers? It's about money. Everything is about money. And for those of you who are younger listening to this, take my advice. Everything is about money. If you're older, you probably already know this. Just because a player is good and we want him on the team doesn't mean that it's a good fit, that we can make it happen. It depends on the price. So let me give you a quick example from a business perspective, and then we'll relate it to Brandon Aiyuk and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's say you have a company and it's doing $2 million a year in revenue. And things are going well, you're growing, but you've got this idea, this vision. You want to get to $10 million in revenue. And that's a great thing. But you have two salespeople. And while they might be pretty decent and they're learning your product, they're getting better at selling it, you know you need to bring in a third person. And not only just any third person, you need to bring in a star salesman, somebody that is well-versed in that industry, somebody that can learn your product quickly, somebody that has a great track record that's going to get you to that 10 million. So what do? You go on a recruiting binge and you're out looking for this guy. And then finally, you come across him. You come across a guy that's a great fit. You sit down, you talk to him, you go, wow, this guy knows my industry. He knows everything. Look at his track record. He's grown companies from a couple million to 10 million. He's done these things. And you have sort of in your mind already what you want to pay this guy. You know he's going to be more expensive than the two guys you already have. You just know that. So you look around at the market, you say, it's going to be tough, but he's probably going to cost this much. And then you talk to the guy about money, and he comes at you with a pretty high figure, and it's much higher than you want to spend or that what you anticipated. But after talking with him, and he, reassures you after he tells you that figure, that he is going to get you to that 10 million. Look at what I've done here. Look at all these things that I've done and these companies that I've taken to 10 million. And you start thinking, well, geez, oh man, if I pay him this, I'm not going to have much money for support of my business, for the delivery of my product or service, which means I'm going to have to skimp on that or find deep value people that can do good work for not a lot of money. And the latter is extremely hard to do. It's hard to find good talent that will work for less money than what the market calls for. So ultimately, you're probably going to have to skimp on how you deliver your product, how you support that team. And that's going to affect your business. That's going to affect your business's ability to get to that 10 million mark. You might get there, but because you have poor delivery, you can't sustain that 10 million in revenue. So you've got a guy cranking out sales, but have no idea how to deliver it to clients because you don't have enough money to pay them. So it's a problem and it's a trade-off. And what do? Do you say yes to this guy and take him up on his expensive offer? Do you negotiate with this guy and do the dance like the Steelers are doing with Aiyuk now? Do you walk away? Do you try to find somebody else? It's not easy to find that guy. It's hard to find those people that can take your business from 1 to 10 million. So how does this relate to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Brandon Aiyuk? So as far as things go with Brandon Aiyuk, he certainly is all that in a bag of chips, I guess, from my generation, growing up in the 90s. That's what we would say. He's ascending. Every year he's getting better. He's at the top of the league in a lot of categories that matter. And he's doing it with Mr. Irrelevant. Now, I know people say, oh, Brock Purdy really is as good is what he says. Well, his pedigree isn't there. His play has been pretty decent, but it's hard to decouple whether it's Brock Purdy or whether it's Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. And not only that, that's another thing that goes in Aiyuk's favor. Look at all those mouths to feed. But he still gets his stats. He still has the impact and the value on the team. So he'd be a tremendous asset for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if we want to look at what he's going to cost and what it would cost for the Pittsburgh Steelers, how it would affect the Pittsburgh Steelers, when we go back to the business example, the Steelers are trying to get to a Super Bowl or a deep playoff run. That's the 10 million in revenue, right? Because right now they're doing 2 million in revenue, right? They're barely getting to the playoffs. And when they get there, we're just getting hammered, just smacked around. No business being here. We need a team that's capable of making a deep playoff run and maybe getting into the Super Bowl. And to do that, we need talent on the Steelers. So it's going to cost something. And if we pay that money, what's that going to take away from? How are you going to pay a guy like George Pickens in a year or two from now? A lot of people forget TJ Watt. His last contract year is 2025. He's going to want paid again. So there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joey Porter Jr., I'm telling you, he's going to be our number one cornerback. He's going to be one of the better cornerbacks in the league. In a couple years, he's going to want paid. So the Steelers have to think about these things. And I want to show you the stats and what people are paid. And then we'll try to figure out together what Brandon Aiyuk is going to cost. So we're looking at Brandon Aiyuk stats here. I mean, it's every year in his 4 years, he's been ascending. Up to last year when he got 1,342 yards, which is fantastic. 17.9 yards per reception. That's near the top of the league. George Pickens is number 1. Brandon Aiyuk is number 2. His success rate is fantastic. Look at that last year. He's over 70%. His catch rate, 71%. He doesn't catch a ton of touchdowns. He caught 7. But again, there's a lot of mouths to feed on the San Francisco 49ers. He doesn't do much else. He's not like Deebo Samuel that runs the ball and things like that. He's just a great pass catcher. So let's look at the league. Let's look at where things stand in the league. So from a receptions perspective, Brandon Aiyuk is 31. Certainly you want your receiver to catch the ball a lot, but catching the ball not as much, but making bigger plays is a good thing too. A lot of times you're going to have possession receivers that catch the ball more. So 31 isn't bad, but look at this catch percentage here. Now, at the top, you're always going to see running backs because they have the shortest passes. You're going to see possession receivers and things like that. And you mostly see running backs. It's all running backs. And then who do you get to? Brandon Aiyuk, Keenan Allen, Devontae Smith, Ahmad St. Brown. So you get in the top of the running backs in the league here, the wide receivers in the league. His catch percentage is fantastic. Yards, he's number 7 in the league. touchdowns. Where's Brandon Aiyuk? He's tied for, I guess it would be 18th in the league. I got him listed as 19 here, but he's tied for 18th with a handful of other guys. Yards per reception. He's second in the league, just behind George Pickens. His longest touchdown is 76 yards. He's only fumbled the ball once. This guy is an ascending number one wide receiver. So when we look at that, that's going to cost something. And Brandon Aiyuk and his agents know this. They've done all this. They understand all of this. And what they've also done is they've looked at where are wide receivers getting paid. And that's what we need to look at here. So let's look at average value per year for contracts. So we've got Justin Jefferson at $35 million, A.J. Brown $32 million, Ahmad St. Brown $30 million, Tyreek Hill $30 million, Jalen Waddle $28.25 million. This is a key number in a key receiver. Why? Because Brandon Aiyuk's stats are better. They're better than Jalen Waddle. Not by leaps and bounds, but they are better. They're about the same age. They're 26. You want a young guy if you're going to pay him. So if you're in Brandon Aiyuk's camp, this is your comparison. And for many of you that have bought houses before and, want to know if you're getting a good deal or if you sold a house, your real estate agents come in with comparables. Let's find a house near you that looks like your house, that's in the same area, that's sold recently. What did it sell for? They find you a few comparables. This would be a comparable. And it's $28.25 million. That is a big number. That would make him, just under TJ Watt that's getting paid $30 million a year. Then you have guys like Davante Adams. That's an old contract. Cooper Kupp, again, he's $26.7 million. I believe he's still playing at the top of the league, but I think Aiyuk's stats are probably just as good, if not better. We've got $25 million at Devontae Smith, $24.25 million Nico Collins. I think, although Nico Collins is 25, Devontae Smith is 26, I would probably have Brandon Aiyuk over these guys based on their stats. Again, they're not too far away. They're comparable. And maybe you could say, I think I'd rather have Devontae Smith. But again, these are comparable guys. DK Metcalf at $24 million. Deebo Samuel just under $24 million. Michael Pittman Jr. at $23.3 million. Brandon Aiyuk is better than Michael Pittman Jr. And the stats say so. Terry McLaurin, $23.2 million. The stats say Brandon Aiyuk is better than Scary Terry. And you get into guys, Calvin Ridley at $23 million, Stephon Diggs at $22.5 million, T. Higgins at just under $22 million. Again, I would have Brandon Aiyuk over T. Higgins. Even though T. Higgins is good, DJ Moore at $20 million. And then who do we have? Diontae Johnson, $18.3 million. We know Aiyuk is better than Diontae Johnson. So having looked at all this, and then let's just look really quickly at some of these total guarantees. As you start getting into the high 20s average per year, you're getting into the 70s, 60s, 80s in guaranteed money. As you get into the mid-20s in contract valuation per year, you're around 50s, 40 million in guaranteed money. The low 20s, anywhere from 20 to 50 million in guaranteed money. So if I'm Brandon Aiyuk's agent, and let's actually look at Brandon Aiyuk's current contract here. So he's going to make $14.1 million this year. And again, looking at the Steelers and just understanding where they stand in their base salaries per year, the cap numbers. We got TJ Watt at $30 million. We've got Cameron Hayward, $22.5 million. Mika Fitzpatrick at $21 million. Then there's a big drop off with Larry Ogunjobi at $13.3 million. James Daniels at $11.1 million. So the Steelers have some people to pay. It's not as bad as other teams. But look at who the Steelers are going to have to pay. We're going to have to pay TJ Watt again. We're going to have to pay Joey Porter Jr. We're going to have to pay George Pickens, thinking if these guys do what they're supposed to do. If Russell Wilson ends up becoming good and we want to lock him in, he's not going to, it's not going to be cheap to keep Russell Wilson. Justin Fields is the guy. It's not going to be cheap to keep him either. So there's going to be people that the Steelers need to pay. So I'm going to tell you right now what's going on here based on these numbers and what's going to happen. Brandon Aiyuk is coming to any team with his agents and saying $30 million per year is what we want. And we want $75 million in guaranteed money. He's going to go as high as he can. Now, although, that's Tyreek Hill money, Ahmad St. Brown money, it's not that far away from Jalen Waddle money. So why not? That's how you do negotiation. Go in higher. Because what they're hoping is that some team is then going to say, okay, we want to come in somewhere in the mid-20s in contract valuation per year, say $25 million. And, we're willing to do $40, $50 million in guaranteed money. And what Brandon Aiyuk and team are hoping is that they're going to settle. They're going to settle somewhere in that mid to high 20 range, that highish 20 range, right around where Jalen Waddle is at $28 million per year, 60, 70 million in guaranteed money. Now, that's what they're looking for. And that's not easy to get. That's a very expensive wide receiver. Just because his stats are good, and just because actually I think he's probably a better pick than Jalen Waddle, doesn't mean that you should pay him that much money. It's a big commitment. But what the Steelers are looking at here, and I know the Steelers, the Steelers, they are doing the opposite of what Aiyuk is doing. They're saying, hey, we want a guy like you for $20 million a year, and we'll give you $30 million guaranteed, right? And a guy like Aiyuk's camp, they don't want to pay that. I think the Steelers would be willing to go $24, $25 million a year for Brandon Aiyuk at around $50 million, maybe $55, possibly $60 million guaranteed. But I think that's going to be around the highest the Steelers are going to go. $25 million a year, $60 million guaranteed. Could they edge up to $26 million? Maybe, but they're not going to go higher than that. They're not going to pay Brandon Aiyuk Jalen Waddle money. And that's what he wants. Brandon Aiyuk wants Jalen Waddle money. He wants $28 million a year. He wants $75 million guaranteed. And the Steelers are not going to give him that. I don't even know if the Steelers are going to do the mid-20s like they said. They'd probably rather settle for somewhere around $23 million a year, $24 million a year. Again, $40, $50 million guaranteed. And Brandon Aiyuk is going to make decent money this year. He's going to make $14.1 million. So he can hedge or he can bet on himself and play this year under that contract and show everybody what he's worth and do it again. And then next year he can guarantee that he gets $28 million or $30 million. Or, he could settle for in the low to mid 20s. It just depends on what he decides, what his camp decides, what the Steelers are willing to do and go for. And again, I think the Steelers would probably say yes, around $25 million, $50 million guaranteed to get a guy like Aiyuk in and really supercharge our wide receiver core. We need that. We need somebody for us to throw the ball to. Pickens is good, but beyond Pickens, we don't have anybody. We really don't have anybody that good. And if you think we do, think again. It's just simply not true. We need more talent. We certainly can go into the season with the wide receiver core that we have, but we can't expect big things. If I'm any team that's playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm double covering Pickens, and I'm going to make all of those number 3s, 4s, and 5s beat me. So those guys are, in that situation would have to prove that they are more than what we think they are. And I certainly could be wrong. Maybe they are more. But I don't think so. We need a guy like Aiyuk, but do we need him for $28 million, $30 million a year? I don't think so. We've got people that we need to pay over the next few years. And also the Steelers don't want to become and get away from who they are and end up giving players the upper hand, giving players these big contracts. We avoided a disaster with Le'Veon Bell. The Steelers are willing to give him a halfway decent contract, and I think he still would have been pretty good. But what did the Jets do? They put him in a different system. They paid him an exorbitant amount of money and didn't get anything back from it. The Steelers know that they never want to be in that situation. And, getting a guy like Aiyuk for in the low to mid 20s isn't as disastrous as it would be if he comes in and doesn't play well and we pay him 28 or 30 million a year and we have to pay him all this guaranteed money. The Steelers just don't work like that. So that's how I think about Aiyuk and the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the truth here, guys. That's really what is going on. So anybody that's writing in the media or pundits about something else, or this is what's happening here. This is what reality is. It's all about money. When you go to buy a house, if you haven't yet, or if you have bought a house, you understand what this is. It's the same process. If you're selling your house, you're trying to get as much as you can from it. If you're buying a house, you're trying to get it for as little as possible. And the reality is that comparables out there are going to dictate. The market is going to dictate what happens. And somebody is going to have to bend, or you find a nice sweet spot where maybe neither party is thrilled, but both can live with it and get the deal done. So we'll see what happens. Once again, I'm Ron John. This is Steelers Therapy. We'll talk to you next time.